Hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. We're glad you're tuning into this episode. We are a viewer and listener supported podcast, so we really appreciate you listening, watching on YouTube. We really encourage you to subscribe to whatever platform you're using. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, or if you're on Apple or however you listen to a podcast, be sure and subscribe. We'd greatly appreciate it. Also, make comments if you like it and share it if you like it. We really need people to make comments and share the episodes that you like. And then also, if you're not already a supporter, we really would encourage you to go to spiritualityadventures.com and you can pick a tier, and we have bonus content for every type of giver. This is a nonprofit, so they're tax-deductible donations, but we do provide bonus content for those who are supporters. So be a part of the team, help support Spirituality Adventures, and we're so glad you're tuning into this episode. Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. Great to have you tune into this episode, and I'm so excited to introduce you to Frank Rogers. And Frank is a professor at Claremont School of Theology in California. He's the Muriel Bernice Roberts Professor of Spiritual Formation and Narrative Pedagogy. And he has written books. He's the co-founder for the Center of Engaged Compassion. And he has written a new memoir called Cradled in the Arms of Compassion. And I actually just got an email from a friend of yours, I guess, David
Morris. Yeah.
And when I looked at, what he sent me and just the kinds of stuff that I do on Spirituality Adventures, I interview musicians and authors and business owners. We always talk about spirituality and what we love. And I also do a lot on recovery and mental health issues as well, just because of my own journey and what I've gone through the last several years myself. And so Frank, welcome to Spirituality Adventures, by the way.
Honor to be here, Fred, really.
Joining us. Yeah, I mean, this is a tough read. You have been through a lot of trauma. You're a sexual abuse survivor, and you really do dive into this in this memoir. But I really loved when I was looking at it. I told you previously before we got this rolling is that when I went through therapy, the therapy's models that helped me the most were DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, mindful meditation world that I've been a part of now for a few years, and I loved IFS, the internal family systems. And Richard Schwartz is the founder of IFS and a friend of yours, I understand, and endorsed your book. So I was like, it got me really curious. I need to read this. Okay. Yeah. So let's start. Tell us where you were born, where you grew up, introduce yourself to the audience, and give us a little of your origin story.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it really is an honor to be here, Fred. So thank you for taking that time to have a conversation with me. I born in San Francisco, California, and lived there up into my high school years. A cradle Catholic. We were a Roman Catholic family until my folks split up the day before I started high school, and my dad had a conversion experience and became part of the Church of God, Anderson, Indiana, kind of a holiness movement denomination. So I would start going there on weekends when I was with him, and summers when we were living with him. And when it was time to go to college, I had a youth minister from that Church of God that I wanted to be just like him when I grew up. And he had gone to Anderson College in Anderson, Indiana. And so I went there for my undergrad, and then went on to the East Coast to do my MDiv and PhD work, and became a professor in spirituality. So.
Yeah. And what is Anderson University a Southern Baptist university?
No, it's part of the movement. They don't call themselves a denomination. They call themselves a movement, but it's the Church of God, Anderson, Indiana movement. Yeah.
Okay. I was, and it's located where?
In Anderson, Indiana. So just north of Indianapolis.
Okay. I was getting confused. I think there's another Anderson, or I don't know. Anyway, I was getting confused with one that's in the Carolinas. That's Institute.
Yeah, in Indiana. Yeah.
But this would be a fairly conservative university, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Faith-based school. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And ironically, when I went there, I rediscovered my Catholic roots. So it didn't quite follow the particular line there, but
okay. And then from there, you went to Presbyterian Theological Seminary.
yeah, which is actually, a fictitious name. So I went to Princeton, Princeton Seminary.
Yeah.
So we changed the name.
I'm reading your book, and I didn't realize that some of the stuff in it was fictional, right?
Nothing in it is fictitious. It's just some of the names are changed,
right?
So that the identifying factors for some of the people, especially kind of the women that I was connected with, I really wanted to protect their privacy and their identity. So we just changed some of their names and hometowns and schools, stuff like that. But all the events are factual. They're all real. There's nothing fiction about it.
Okay. Okay. Well, but it was a little like not, start reading it, and I'm like going, what is Presbyterian Theological Seminary in New Jersey? Like, and then I'm like going, isn't that Princeton? And then so my brain is like, and then like Kathy shows up, and I'm like, as the story goes along, and Kathy keeps popping in, I'm like, and I'm looking at the back, I'm saying, no, it says he has a wife named Elaine with 3 kids, and I was trying to figure out as I was reading along how Kathy fit in with, well, when's he going to get divorced? And when's he going to,
Yeah. What kind of happened early on? I mean, in the book, I mean, so we divorced almost as soon as I came, after my son was born, a couple of years after my son was born.
Was your son's name Justin?
My son's name is Justin, right?
Okay. So I was trying to figure out which names were.
So the only 2 names that are off would be Kathy's name and Presbyterian Theological Seminary. Those are the only 2 names. I think that we changed, and it was mainly to protect Kathy and the people who informed Kathy. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and so when you met your first wife at the college, is that right? You met at the. Yeah,
no, I met Kathy at Camp Good News at a summer camp for boys and girls in Cape Cod.
Oh, okay. All right.
I had a brief relationship when I was in college that I talk a little bit about in the book, but that was just a young puppy love type of a thing. And but yeah, Kathy was
the person you named Kathy, who had you had to believe this, and you had to do. She had that whole list of
right. I had to get permission from her dad before we go on a date. I had to agree to her 10 principles, and then I had to agree that that she wouldn't kiss anybody until her wedding day kiss with the person she was marrying. And so those were the 3 conditions when we first met.
Yeah.
I kind of lied my way through all 3 of them. I mean, or not lied, but I went ahead and wrote her dad, and, he thought it was a little strange, but, what the heck? And he was kind about it. And the 10 principles, I really didn't believe them, but, I could do enough theological contortions, well, the spirit of this, there's some truth to this that I could, buy into. And the whole kissing thing, I mean, a sexual abuse survivor, touch can be so suspect anyway that it kind of created a safe place. It's like, great, we don't have to get into the world sexuality here then.
Okay, so I'm curious one thing about your theological journey, and I kind of want to touch on that, but then after I hear a little bit of that, I want to dive into your the sexual abuse journey, and I really want to dig into that, and then I want to leave time at the end to really talk about, like in the back of the book, you give those 10 things that you found really valuable and important for healing from trauma. And I kind of want to leave some time to talk about healing from trauma. Yeah. You've been through a lot of intense trauma. So theologically, you started out evidently fairly conservative. Is that accurate?
Yeah. I mean, traditional. I mean, Catholic boy, went to catechism and, kind of bought, the Catholic orthodoxy. And then, when my dad's church, it was a kind of a Bible believing church, and it felt, home enough until I kind of got radicalized in college and learned historical criticism and alternative religions and things like that. So I started asking more questions. But yeah.
Did you pretty quickly embrace a more progressive theology early on in your college career, or
I would,
in other words, did you go through some kind of deconstruction theologically at some point? Did you have or was it more related to your own relationship with trauma?
Yeah, for me, it was really related to my relationship with trauma. And it was a profound theological deconstruction. I mean, for, the traditional idea of a God, some being up in the sky who is all knowing and all powerful and can intervene in history whenever he's, usually he wants to, or decides not to for his own, personal reasons. And you just have to trust that. For an abuse survivor, that's a pretty dangerous understanding of God. And but that was my understanding. And so it's like, why, God, did you allow this to happen? Where were you in the midst of this? Didn't you care enough about me then that you'd want to stop this? And so that God needed some serious deconstruction before anything more plausible would be able to emerge.
Yeah, I hung on to I did a Tom Oord interview. His new book came out, The Death of Omnipotence. And then he's made up this new term, omnipotence. Which amipotence, love.
Got it. Right.
Love as the central, uncontrolling love as the central attribute of God versus, the classic deist position. And I tried to hang on to that classic deist position, always leaning more toward free will defense arguments. And then, in the end, you have to rely on mystery to make any sense of evil and suffering in that model, right? Because God's in control in some way or another, even though he's allowing free will to work. But the interplay between God's almighty power and human free will and that dance, I tried to hold on to that, leaning toward the free will world. But once I went through my own emotional breakdown, I guess, trauma, and really just my relationship to God kind of fell apart. And it just actually felt like if God existed ever, it felt like God had set me up for a failure and then abandoned me and kicked me to the curb. It's kind of emotionally how it felt.
Exactly. I'm exactly the same for me. If that is who God is, then boy, it sure sucks to be us, right? And
your question on page 209 of your memoir, how can God live with himself when he sees a young girl being raped by her dad and he doesn't do a thing?
Yeah.
Ugh.
That cuts it right to the bone, right?
Ugh.
And for an abuse survivor, that is our question, right? So whatever happened to me, why did God look down and allow that to happen and not do a thing about it? And there's no good answer. I mean, except for that God doesn't exist. That notion of the all-powerful God who could intervene in history, it just decides not to. That God doesn't exist.
I'm going to sit back and watch this. Let's,
Exactly, right. And also think about it from a survivor, so what am I supposed to do as a survivor? You're supposed to not ask questions, trust that God is doing it for God's own good reason. God cares about the perpetrator's free will, and so it's not going to interrupt, and just count it all joy because you're actually participating in the suffering of Christ, and you're going to be better for it. To an abuse survivor, that's a theology that serves the perpetrator, right? To have the abuse survivor, the victim, stay quiet and not ask questions and take it on yourself. That's an insidious and poisonous theology and an insidious view of God.
Yeah, it left me emotionally. I felt that way, even though I didn't go through what you went through. And what I went through, a lot of people could just say, well, that's your fault, Fred, and but there's elements to it, that I thought, like, the prayers that I prayed millions of times that God didn't answer,
right,
that led to my downfall. It made me like, well, F you, God. I mean, I literally, that's
exactly
how I felt. Like, it's like,
exactly.
Oh my gosh. And
I was,
that was
yeah.
painful for me. Here I was a megachurch pastor and then having all of these.
Oh,
Oh, jeez.
imagine you're preaching this God this
Yeah.
I don't believe in, or doesn't make
I-
sense, or surely screws up with my faith life.
oh
It's
gosh.
excruciating to think that God doesn't care enough about you to keep the horrific things from happening, or or God is not coming in and intervening and being with you through it. It does feel like abandonment
Mhm.
and some cruel God that you just. I find a lot of help from the post-Holocaust theologians like Melissa Raphael, who said, that whole notion of a God that can intervene in history when it suits his whims and decide not to, and can overpower human agency, and has his own good reasons. She said that God looks more like Hitler than it does anything redemptive. I mean, that's a really masochistic understanding of a sacred God, and it's not that powerful. I mean, I love your friend, who has this notion of love and compassion. A sacred being that can be with us in our deepest pain and just be a presence of care and compassion that could rekindle a spark of hope and life out of the deepest despair. That's true power. I mean, that's a whole different kind of power than somebody who can come in and control like a puppeteer, human beings. That's where I go for sacred power.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's dive into, the backdrop for this memoir. You started off with a scene with your Catholic, you're basically getting abused by a nun who sends you to the priest who then sexually abuses you. That's how you start the memoir off, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, and that first scene is really important because it sets up the whole quest. Because, yeah, I mean, this really, strict nun that is all dialing it in with the catechism and all that. But just to kind of get away from that, I went into a church just on a whim, and in the midst of that, had just this amazing mystical experiences. Like I saw the statue of Mary, and I felt like Mary had come down with this maternal embrace and care and was sitting with me, cradling me in compassion in this profound way. And it got interrupted by this priest who came out of the confessional and saw me there alone, and then invited me to his office and sexually abused me. And for me, that's exactly the question is like, which of one of those is real, right? I mean, was that mystical experience real, or was the evil that I experienced, does that just wash all that away? And I'm just left with the shame of my own trauma. That frames for me my psycho-spiritual quest is, how do I find a sacred resource that can see me through the horrific trauma of a sexual abuse survivor?
And you were about eight at that time?
Six,
Six,
7 or 8, yeah, something like that, right?
And then had you already experienced abuse before that priest in your home?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the priest was really, I mean, that was a one-off. I mean, that was just a visiting person,
Right.
and it's the only time that happened. The real heart of my sexual abuse came from my mom. And, my mom, who had been molested by her stepfather from the time she was 5 until the time she was 18. He was the real predator in the family. But my mom kind of had a very skewed understanding of sexuality and intimacy. And I was her oldest, her number one. She had a horrific marriage. And so she turned to me for her sense of closeness in every way, including sexually and in its various forms. And that was the real pain. And she didn't protect us from her stepfather, when he came and visited us. And so his stepfather raped me and raped my sister. And that's the real primary place of the sexual trauma, that the legacy we're living.
Is your mom still alive?
No, she just passed a few weeks ago, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did she ever find any healing herself? I'm curious, because she's along for this journey all the way through, right? The mom becomes almost an archetype, right? There's the abuse mom, and then there's the piata.
You're right, exactly.
The contrast between the two right? Did
Exactly.
she ever find healing herself?
No, she never found healing. And
Uh,
interestingly enough, I mean, she insisted that she would never abuse me, and the way she had been abused, with the kind of violent maliciousness, she never did. But the kind of the seductive closeness, intimacy abuse, she finally got that in a therapy session. That when she came to one of my therapy sessions, that we had for the first time, was able to hear that, and when that happened, I mean, she just broke down and sobbed and just sobbed and expressing just the remorse, just the horror of what she had went through. But then it got bottled up again. I mean, she was never able to kind of go there in a healing journey of her own. And interestingly enough, until she passed away, I mean, she just passed away a few weeks ago. And when we put her in hospice, and when it was clear she had a matter of days, I went and visited her, and she was on morphine, and she was, unconscious and on Ativan, completely doped up. And the hospice nurse couldn't understand it, because my mom was just scowling and grimacing and in just severe distress. And they thought she was on enough meds that she should have been okay. And what I had realized was that she had always been telling me she was terrified to die, because when she died, she was, Catholic schoolgirl. She was going to have to go up and see her maker, and she had so much shame for all of the abuse that she had lived with, but the things that she had done in her promiscuity and the ways that she had been with me. She could not imagine God in any way doing anything but be repulsed by her and just reject her. She was terrified. Wow. And it was like now she was hours away from death, and her whole body and being is just like grimacing out of distress that she's going to be dying soon. And I realize it's like all of the parts of her that carry that shame, they're like, no, don't die. We don't want to be forced into, what's on the other side. And so through kind of a meditative prayer experience, I just imagined myself, okay, I'm just going to kind of be with my mom in all of those shamed parts of her and tell her each one of those, it came from your pain, it came from suffering, it could be washed away, and you can be clean of that, and it doesn't make you untouchable, and God is nothing but compassion and will hold you. And I did this prayer experience with her for 2 hours. And the hospice nurse came in and said, my mom was completely at peace.
Wow.
She was at peace, and she passed like 3 or 4 hours later. And
wow.
So not in this world, but I think kind of in the spirit world, however we understand that, I think she finally came to a place where she can be with her own shame and find healing in the midst of that, and recognize that even as horrific as it is, it doesn't make us disposable goods. It doesn't make us untouchable. Yeah. That sacred reality of compassion cradles us even in the midst of that.
Wow. Beautiful. As I was reading through, the picture of your mother through the memoir, I kept, my little pastor armchair psychologist thing kept trying to think of diagnosing her as like borderline personality disorder is what it sounded like. I don't know if that's even I don't know.
No, it's somewhere in that realm. Yeah, she was like a over the top, kind of narcissistic, just did not have a capacity to really recognize other people in the room. She was, footloose and fancy free. I mean, she could have been a Fanny Bryce, she really had that charisma and that energy, but because of her trauma and her abuse, it got all twisted out. And yeah, she was kind of a hard person to be around. Yeah.
When did the abuse stop for you? Did it continue into your teen years?
Well, the more blatant, kind of sleeping together and showers together and that stuff stopped when I was, in grade school. But she had an over the top lasciviousness. I mean, she would, be around without all her clothes on and, plant big wet ones and want to give me big hugs, and she's topless. I mean, that kind of stuff that lingered really until I went to college.
Okay. And then it sounded like, you're a great student. You're super smart, super brilliant. You've studied with some amazing professors, with, was it Dr. Who did your PhD advisor?
Dr. Loader. Yeah, it was a brilliant.
Dr. Loader.
Dr. Rock there, and then Dr. Massey when I was in
Massey,
college.
yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, such a brilliant figure,
Amazing. I kind of look at that, it was really kind of an addiction for me. It was a form of addiction. I mean, it was a way of living in my head because I couldn't face all the trauma when I was in college or in my seminary years. And so I hid out, the monkey on my back was I would just read intellectual tomes, right? And, and for whatever reason, I went that way instead of any other of a number of addictions I could have easily have gone into to hide away from my trauma. It just turned out to be one that, served me well in the end,
Yeah, and got you good positions. Where was your first teacher position?
Well, I taught at Princeton when I was in my PhD program. I was doing some adjunct for them, but my first full-time position was here at Claremont. So I've been here 35 years. Yeah.
But so when you went to Claremont as a full professor, and then you were working toward tenure, right? And you're married,
right?
Kids.
One kid, right?
One kid, Justin. And then you had basically what led to that sort of break where you wound up in the hospital for an extended period of time? What were the things that transpired? Because you're a successful pastor, you're on the tenure track, you're brilliant, students probably love you, but then you have this huge, sound like a big meltdown break kind of a thing.
A total breakdown, meltdown. So I had always struggled with depression and self-loathing, and I'd go to bed every night with suicidal, just thinking of ways I would kill myself, and for years and years, through high school, through college and grad school, but never, but just learned to live with that. And part of a sexual abuse survivor is you carry so much shame about what happened to you and what's really going on, the feelings that you're having, and the images you're imagining and remembering. That for me, I had to put up a facade of like perfection. I mean, it's like so I let nobody even have a hint that I was mentally troubled in any way, let alone the kinds of sexual abuse stuff that I was kind of wrestling around with. So I did put on that facade of I'm going to be a great teacher. I'm going to be a great professor. I'm going to speak and be engaging and witty. And, I'm going to be on committees, and I'm going to, serve the community, and, all this way that just totally hid the real severe rages and horrors that were inside of me. What made it break was when my son was born, and my mom then came down to meet him. He was a few months old, and my mom wanted to be close with him in the ways that she had been close with me, taking a shower with him and kissing him and stuff. And I just erupted. I mean, went ballistic, in front of her, like, you are never touching my kid, get away. But then it just opened up this cauldron where for months and months, I would just start having nightmares and the images and flashbacks of what she had done for me that I just couldn't stop, the rages, the shame, the self-laceration. I started cutting myself and started finding ways to kill myself, and then show up at school and pretend to be the perfect professor until I just couldn't do it anymore. And I separated from my wife. And so kind of like publicly admitted, I don't have it all together. Started losing weight. I was severely depressed and got so depleted that I almost drove off a cliff and ended up in a mental hospital.
Yeah. You were literally in a pharmacy, it sounded like, it sounded like you were there for hours, perhaps, or long enough for the pharmacist to notice you, and then you were left there and were driving, and like somebody noticed you or your car for like over a 24-hour period or something like.
It was after we separated, and I just went into this crazy depression. I stopped eating. I was losing weight. I was isolating, and then finally decided, you know what, I'm going to kill myself. But I was so dissociated and kind of disconnected that I decided I was going to go buy sleeping pills, and so I went to a pharmacy. and I was so dissociated and kind of, energyless that I was standing in front of these sleeping pills for like 60 minutes or so until finally the pharmacist came over and said, I don't think you want to buy these, and I'm just like, what? It was like I was in a stupor, and it woke me up, and oh yeah, okay, I'm just looking, and some lame thing like that. And he said, yeah, I think you ought to, try to go find some help. And I went out into my car, and I mean, it was like I had a leak in my spirit. It was like my spirit and energy was just leaking out from me, and I was becoming more and more lethargic, and I was living up in the mountains. And so I was trying to drive home from that pharmacy, just get me up to my cabin and get me into my bed. And as I'm driving, I mean, I'm not even able to concentrate. I can't even see the road exactly and stay in the lanes. And until finally I just kind of passed out, and my leapt over on the side of my passenger seat. I drive a clutch, and so I took my foot off the clutch, which stopped the car, but it went right up alongside of a cliff. I mean, I could have just easily have driven off the side of this cliff, and I just laid there. And it's like 9:00 at night and a wintry night, and nobody came. I just, please, anybody come and find me, get me to my cabin. And then I realized, oh my God, I almost just died right here. I really do need to get some help. And so I just mustered all the energy I could possibly muster just to start my car and just coast it down the hill to get to my workplace. And then they were having a banquet, and my president found me and saw me. I mean, I couldn't even move. I couldn't even get out of the car. And they said, we got to take you to the ER. And they did. They did all the blood tests. And what they found out was that I had a severe deficiency in potassium and phosphorus. And I asked them, what is that? And they said, that's basically the electricity in your body. It's the thing that keeps your heart pumping. It's the thing that keeps your lungs moving. And I was so depleted, they said I could have died within hours or days. And that explained why I was just so lethargic. It's what the Carpenter singer, Linda Carpenter, what she died of was from a phosphorus and potassium deficiency that came out of anorexia. I mean, it's that serious. So,
wow. And how long were you in a rehab type environment?
I was in, they put me into a mental institution because I was, I finally admitted that I was suicidal and that I would kill myself if they let me go from the ER. I was there for about 4 weeks. Then they let me out over Christmas for a couple of days. And then I had a second meltdown and went back in for another about 3 weeks. And then I was an outpatient for a couple of years.
And then was this the first time you really started diving into therapy at this juncture, or had you already
any real therapy? Yeah. I mean, my wife and I had gone to marriage counselors, we went to several of them, and I was trying different things, but after that was when I did the deep dive into therapy and found, an amazing therapist, and, was with him for 10 years. And that was.
Yeah. And so that's where you first really started getting honest about your trauma, your sexual abuse. And then it sounded like, how the mind works with your memory. Like it sounded like, it's the way your memory was trying to piece together your past.
Right.
In therapy. Isn't it like, describe that a little bit? Cause I think it's interesting how, how reliable and then unreliable sometimes your memory is. And then how your trauma gets stored in your body, and how those memories sometimes can be super accurate. You can trust your body, but then at the same time, you don't always piece it together like factually accurately, right? Describe that process of how the memory organizes and deorganizes through trauma, and then how do you piece that back together in a healing environment?
Yeah,
it sounded like a really interesting part of the journey of just trying to reassemble memories, right, and experiences. Right. And how it's stored in your body. That was fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, it's a harrowing journey. I mean, it really can be. So when my folks split up when I was 13, it was so excruciating. I said, I am never going to let myself feel pain like this again. And I just locked up my inner life, and I did not have a memory before that. On until I had my breakdown. I mean, I had no memories at all, but just tiny flashes of this or that, or of a nightmare. And so it was about trying to reconstruct what had happened. And while I didn't have the memories at the time, I did have the bodily sensations, when I was have a nightmare of being raped or something. I mean, I could feel it in my body in those very places. It's like my body knew what had happened, but the memory hadn't been connected with it. And also the emotional life, right? I mean, just seeing a priest in a movie, and all of a sudden I'm just ready to kill, right? I mean, just the rage that you're like, where the hell is that coming from? Or my mom coming to visit, and she puts her hand on my shoulder, and I'm like, whoa, don't touch me. I mean, what's it's like the emotions and the bodies, they are wired. They still store the trauma. I mean, they it's like Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score. I mean, they know. And so, I would like try to remember things, and ask, from my siblings and whatnot, hey, where did we live? What happened here? Do you ever remember being around Harold and that kind of stuff? While also having nightmares that were not memories, but they were symbolic representations. And then a little glimpse of a memory here, a little glimpse of a memory there. But then I would actually like fantasize, well, maybe this happened, or maybe this happened. And it's like trial and error, kind of bits and pieces, putting it all back together until there's an integration, like the body, the emotions, and the memories. Like, oh yeah, no, this is what happened. Yeah, now I remember this exactly. It's a harrowing process, and you're doubting yourself and ashamed, trying to wonder, and yeah, it's a tough process to be a trauma survivor.
Yeah, and describe shame for me, because obviously Brene Brown has really, I think, done a great service to the world, as she's basically a sociologist that studied shame and then tried to unpack that for all of us. And I've heard her say things like shame is an unwanted story, shame is never good enough, shame is self-hatred. I know when I melted down publicly like I did, I never wanted to be that pastor, who screwed up like I did. In fact, I'd prayed a million I'd ask God, kill me and take me off the planet before I'd ever be unfaithful or do anything to disgrace the name of Jesus, kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And then now it's the whole world knew about it in 24 hours. Once the Kansas City Star published that article, it hit Christianity Today, it hit the Religious News Service, Charisma. I mean, every magazine feed in the world, it went around the world in 24 hours. And I literally wanted, I didn't care if I lived or died at that point. I was so humiliated. I hated myself. I was angry at me. I was angry I felt angry at God, and the shame just almost took me out. Mm-hmm. I just didn't even want to get out of bed, So I can't even imagine, and what I went through, like I said, I could blame half of it on myself, right? Or 3/4 of it, and so you're dealing with a shame response that's similar probably that I had, but you might be blaming yourself for all that stuff, and yet it's not your fault, right? Or at least how does it, as a kid who survived all that, you still end up feeling shame for it, right?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely.
And you're like, an adult can come and say, well, Frank, it's not your fault. That wasn't your deal. But then you felt, to describe that dichotomy there a little bit between like the innocence of a kid who's not his fault, not your fault at all, but then the way you take on that sense of shame and that sense of ownership of it. Describe that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, what you described that you went through, I mean, I resonate completely. Oh my God, if anybody ever knew what I was really like, or what had happened to me, or what I'm thinking about inside, or what I'm can't stop thinking about abuse images or whatever. I mean, they would just be repulsed by me, and I would be, just excrement in the other people's eyes. I mean, it's that kind of shame. And for an abuse survivor, I mean, so when you're a child, these are adult figures, right? Who have a power and a presence to them that you don't question so quickly as a child. I mean, you don't like what is happening, but how do you make sense of it? Like if I got raped, I mean, I thought, well, I must have made him mad. I must have, done something that made him want to do that to me, or I was just disgusting enough, or a bad enough kid that I deserve this kind of a thing, or from my mom too. It's like, I must be, making her do this to me, or wanting to be close to her in some way, and inviting this. And I mean, as a child, you're trying to make sense of something that is, nonsensical, right? I mean, it's impossible to make sense of that, but you take that onto yourself. So it must be something about me. I must be really soiled. I must be really damaged goods. I must be, original sin. I must really be depraved. I mean, they must be right, those theologians. I must have been depraved to my core, right? I mean, that's how insidious that doctrine can be.
Yeah, I hear you. I am that filthy, dirty, rotten rag,
Exactly. That is me. And so now I'm going to hide that and not let anybody see it, because it's only going to confirm the truth, that, oh my God, this is what Frank is really, really like. Oh, we're going to be disgusted. And God, God's nowhere to be found, right? God is, hey, come, God, please, I'm so sorry. Forgive me. I want to be good, faithful. Just come to me and be with me. And, that God has abandoned us. God is nowhere to be seen. So I must be that bad. I must be so bad that not even God is willing to get God's hands dirty with me.
Yeah.
That's excremental.
It is shame. And we need to be healed from it. When I read Rohr's book, Falling Upward, and I started, I'm always reading the footnotes, and then I started reading everybody that Rohr was footnoting, and it led me to that Matthew Fox book on original blessing.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And, it was like drinking fresh drink of water,
Absolutely. That's an antidote. Exactly. Yeah. So also, let's make a turn. I mean, this is pretty horrific, the trauma stuff.
I know.
But there's healing from this shame. And that's, kind of what the book is about, is the quest that I went on. And for me, one of the huge turns was, instead of demonizing all of my inner world, my feelings or my impulses or my bodily sensations, beginning to approach them with curiosity and saying, okay, I feel what I feel for a reason. My body is reacting the way it is for a reason. But this was a hard turn. I mean, it took my therapist years of saying, Frank, you're feeling what you feel for a reason. And so instead of I'm a bad person because I'm feeling these things or thinking these things, where did this come from? What is underneath this? And being able to recognize that all of those inner feelings and impulses, they can be held with care and compassion. They can be met and restored. Even our shame itself, in its own counterintuitive way, is trying to help us. It's trying to protect us from being known in a way that's going to end up abandoning us and being rejected. It's like, okay, I'm going to make you feel shame so you don't let yourself go out there and let other people see you where you will be rejected and repulsed. And it's a twisted survival mechanism, but it means well. And it's really an invitation for healing, an invitation for restoration. So if we can even learn to have compassion for our shame, compassion for the things that feel excremental to us, that's when they are transformed. That's when they become gold. That's the alchemy of healing and transformation. And that IFS invites us into, for example.
Yes. Yeah. And that was a hard turn for me too, because I grew up with the battle of the flesh and the spirit, and you conquer it and you suppress it and you victory over it and you pray it away, and and then that didn't work.
Right.
And, like, I'm left with all of the negative shit, right? And then all of a sudden I'm like, that's when I started getting into the mindful meditation and the self-compassion and the exact things you're talking about. Like, okay, well, how do I sit with this with curiosity, openness, and non-judgment?
Exactly.
And that began a part of my healing journey that I'm obviously still on. And I thought it was interesting you cited Walter Wink, which, I knew Wink from his Power trilogy, right? Like his, but you talked about how he said that we almost have to go through our enemy for our healing. If I know that's probably an awkward paraphrase. but and then it was almost like your mother was that enemy that you had to go through to find your healing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, Wink's idea is that our enemies are kind of custom made for us. I mean, the people that repel us and repulse us and trigger us. There's a reason. I mean, there's something in us that is being triggered by that particular person, and the fact that we don't all have the same enemies is kind of, a clue around this. Is the person that you just go, oh, that's just the way they are, and I kind of have care for them, and I can have curiosity for them. To me, it's like they just trigger me, like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. And so Wink is saying that's because there's stuff in our shadow that has not been brought into the light of day, that has not been accepted and integrated and restored. And our enemies, the people who repulse us, they are the divining rods that are able to, with pitch perfect accuracy, surface the thing in me that still hasn't been healed, or the thing in me that still hasn't been held. And so instead of, just demonizing the enemy, let's take the time to do the U-turn and say, okay, what in me is being activated here, so that I can find a space of healing and recovery, and then get back to my best self from which I can then look at the person that is triggering me, say, okay, now what's really going on in this situation, and engage it with clarity and wisdom and compassion and resilience, whatever is called for in the situation. And I found that to be tremendously true for me. I mean, my mom, as long as I was being triggered, I mean, I needed to deal with my own healing instead of just demonizing her, until I could get to a place where, okay, now I can have a conversation with her and not be knocked off my center every time I see her or I hear her voice. That was on me to get to that healing space.
Yeah. When as I was reading, I've been reading so much here the last 4 years, but, like Ken Wilber's Religion of Tomorrow, and he dives into the shadow work kind of stuff that, that we're talking about here. Right. And, I thought that was interesting. And then so with your mom being the enemy that you have to go through to work through this shadow work that we're talking about here, the healing around the shame, around all of this, you continue to bring out this pieta. Okay, sorry.
All right.
Yeah, pieta, and then the Shekinah, that when you went through your fictional journey, and you, to me, like the Shekinah idea and the pieta idea were interlinked, right?
They are interlinked. Yeah.
Right, and then how they play against your mother, so to speak, or how your mother got you to describe what that means. Describe what pieta means, and then the Shekinah component of that, and how it relates to the healing part of your mother journey.
Yeah. So Pietà is the image. Michelangelo had a famous Pietà in the Sistine Chapel, where, or St. Peter's Square, where Mary is holding the dead, broken body of Jesus in her lap, and is just holding him and gazing upon him with just immense compassion and deep care and sorrow. Really gets the pain and is able to hold it with love in the midst of that. And for me, that became an image that really resonated with the moments that I had, where I would try to be with the wounded ones inside of me, the child in me that was still carrying this form of abuse. And when I could just kind of cradle that boy and hold him in the same kind of maternal like compassion, it aligned me with this just kind of this cosmic sense of a maternal sacred compassion that just is woven into the universe. And for me, that is my sense of God now, that just this kind of force field of love, this force field of compassion that is woven into every moment of experience. I mean, that is holding every single thing with understanding and with kindness and with care, and who sees it and gets it and feels it. And in that capacity to kind of be there as that maternal womb-like presence, is able to resuscitate our spirits, is able to help us get out of bed again, is able to help us walk another step on the healing journey and find hope and resilience and care. That kind of maternal presence of the Pietà is my image of God now. And it has sustained me throughout my journey. And as I was kind of doing this healing journey, I would do these imaginative explorations into my inner world. Like, hey, what other child in me is still wounded and needing to be cared for? What other part of me is feeling shame and excremental and needs to be washed and held with care? And as I was doing that, this kind of, I think like a sacred, like a spirit guide, this embodiment, the Shekinah would come in, much like when we meditate on the Gospels and we see the figure of Jesus might come and meet us. It was like this figure, this Jewish figure from the Hebrew Bible of who is the maternal face of God, who would wander the world and be wherever people were suffering and try to knit their spirits back together. She would kind of come into my meditations and tend to the wounded ones within me. And she was not the same thing as this Pietà cosmic presence, but she was like a hologram of it. She was like an embodiment or an incarnation of it, that you could interact with and be with in a profoundly healing way. And that spiritual journey of getting to know that kind of Shekinah presence and coming to know that we are held in this maternal cosmic compassion really is what resuscitated me out of my own trauma journey.
Wow. Yeah.
I explain it. Is that well clear?
Well, and it ties into, this. So like I'm on this kind of embracing the more process, open and relational theology world now, which obviously Claremont is known for, right?
Right here.
And
John Cobb's office was right next door.
Right, exactly. And so I'm just diving into this world like I'm a kid again, and just kind of just being a sponge and trying to read. Tom Ward's trying to get me to do a PhD with him in the process world. I'm like, do I really need another degree? But I'm actually thinking of doing it just to put some discipline to my studies,
Good stuff.
But yeah, the big concept for me, my favorite new verse, how I memorized thousands of verses as a young follower of Jesus. And my new one is 1 John 4:16. God is love. Those who live in love live in God, and God lives in them. And that uncontrolling love is at the heart of my understanding of God now. And then, and I'm actually kind of frustrated with it because I wanted a bit stronger God who could do some stuff. I remember in my older day, if you're not an atheist and then you believe in God, why would you want to believe in a God who can't do anything?
Right.
I mean, you might as well just be an atheist, right? Yeah. So this space for me of reshaping my concept of God, which is really and it's been a painful process for me, honestly, Frank, but to embrace the loving, uncontrolling nature of God and really coming to realize that anytime you dominate anything, that's not love. Anytime that kind of top down isn't the kind of love that you're describing in this. I'm going to get this. I'm going to have to work on this name. Pietà. This mother who embraces the suffering and just envelops you with love. Mm-hmm. That's like, okay, God, I want to know that God.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And let's not minimize. It's excruciating for that old God to die and to die inside of us and in our religious imaginations. I totally get that.
Yeah.
For me, that maternal God that we're talking about, when we go see, somebody in the hospital who's got cancer or somebody who's in despair and suicidal, and we sit next to them, we can't do anything. We can't fix them. We can't, make them all better at all. But the capacity to sit next to them with our heart open and us fully getting it, like, I see the pain, I see the despair, I see what you are going through, and I am gut wrenched for you, and I will sit right here with care and love and compassion. That's not doing nothing. That's right. Doing something pretty extraordinary. And that energy, that it's a sacred energy. I call it compassion. Yeah. That sacred energy has the power to restore one's spirit, to help one, feel met and got in the midst of their despair, perhaps, or in their dying journey. That's powerful for me.
It is, and I found that in the AA hall.
Yeah,
because I landed in the AA hall like going, if there's a God, F God. Mm-hmm. I was so angry. I was so angry at myself. I was so ashamed, and who wants to end up in an AA hall? It's like I did. And then I go to the one, and it turns out out of 200 people, 50 or 60 of them were at my church. I had the mega church, and I had no anonymity, and all I could feel was just shame but then, just being present with people who are honest and vulnerable and real about their pain and their suffering and their addictions and their, whatever. And then they're present there with you and they love you and you're not alone in it.
Exactly.
And you find a sponsor who has walked through it too, and you're not alone in it. And there's people who love you despite all your crap. And
you see it all. They see it all. So it's not that they're pretending. They see the crap and they love you anyway.
And that's what started healing me. Was like people who loved me anyway, even when I was totally honest about all my shit. Right.
Exactly. That's Shekinah.
Yeah.
That's that maternal Pietà presence. That is sacred power to restore. Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that. So at the end of your book, you listed out, and we're getting short on time here, but I want to give a little bit to this. You listed out 10 things at the very end. And I just want to mention each one of them, actually, if you don't mind. And you can give like a 1 minute, 2 minute comment on each one, maybe. But you talked about this course toward healing. And the first one is circles of support. Mm-hmm. Just give a brief comment.
Yeah, I mean, finding people who could do what we just said, who would be with us in the abuse journey and say, hey, I know it's hard, I'll be with you, you feel what you feel for a reason and you're not making this up. And people who could just companion us, whether they're friends or spiritual directors or therapists, but that's indispensable. Yeah.
And the second, setting boundaries.
Yeah, well, for me, I couldn't be around my mom while I was trying to heal from the trauma, because every time I heard her voice, I would just get reactivated and triggered. And so I had to set limits on, Mom, I needed a season where I just can't be in contact with you while I really give myself to my healing journey until I'm strong enough that I can resume a conversation with you. So yeah, we need to set limits so that we're not continually reactivated, or the trauma journey is going to hit a brick wall.
Mm. A season of recovery.
Yeah. Yep. Mike Liu, who wrote a book, No Longer Strangers, who really was helpful on healing from male sexual abuse. But he said that we need to have a season where we put out closed for repairs. Kind of the shop of our own window. I just needed a season where I'm doing nothing but giving myself to my recovery journey. So I'm going to minimize my work. I'm going to minimize other commitments and just say, this is my season of recovery.
Mm. And it seemed like your school, Claremont, actually supported you.
Claremont is amazing. It is an amazing school.
Amazing to me.
The kind of support. They really have been amazing. Yeah, they really did.
What about, and then 4, learning about sexual abuse?
Yeah, for me, it was so empowering. I would just read everything I could on sexual abuse, whether it was nonfiction stuff or novels or watch movies. And it wasn't a wallowing in the pain. For me, it was so validating. I mean, I could read these descriptions and go, yes, they're describing me. Yeah, those are my symptoms. Okay, there's a reason. All right, there's a people that's my people. It was extraordinarily validating, as well as getting tools for what do you do when you're activated and dysregulated. And it's a great literature to be a support.
And 5 is trauma therapy. And you mentioned the internal family systems, Richard Schwartz, and you're a friend of his. That's cool. And then the EMDR, and then the great book, The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah, which is really the trauma manual as far as I'm concerned. But important about trauma therapy, it's not just talk therapy, because trauma is wired into our brains, and it's the way our neurons fire, the ways that memories are constellated, and those actually have to be reshifted. They have to be renewed and realigned. And so it takes very intentional types of trauma therapy that involves, deep imagination work or meditative work or rapid eye movement work. And Bessel van der Kolk's book lists, like 10 or 15 great trauma modalities that really get at the deep, deep healing of rewiring our brains and our bodies.
And then number 6 is trusting my body. Trusting my body.
Yeah, instead of fighting it, there's something awful about me. My body reacts this way when somebody touches me. I cringe. Okay, well, so what is going on? And my body is carrying something. It's doing that for a reason. So let me trust that instead of demonizing it or saying it's just because I'm a bad person that I'm reacting this way. No, okay, my body's trying to tell me something here. Let's listen to it.
Okay. 7 is giving expression to my emotions.
Yeah, I mean, I needed to be able to get it out, and whether that would be to howl or to I'm an incessant journaler. That's why I was able to write this book, because I can go back to all these experiences but writing them out on paper or coloring them or music or power walking and yelling at the trees. I mean, I needed to be able to give expression to the angers and the lament and all of that stuff.
Mm. Yeah. And, even just, we're not so great at knowing our feelings, like Mark Brackett's Permission to Feel, that kind of stuff, where you become a little more sophisticated in getting in touch with your emotions. That's been good for me. Number 8, befriending and restoring my psychic states.
Yeah, and for me, this was the game changer. And it's related to internal family systems too, that I hadn't known about. But and that is that instead of fighting what I feel, trusting that what I feel is there for a reason and wants to be heard and tended. So instead of like manipulating it or praying it away, which I say is kind of like trying to push a buoy underwater, right? The emotions keep coming up, the lusts keep coming, the rage keeps coming, the shame keeps coming. So, all right. So instead of fighting it or trying to fix them or minimize them, let me turn to them and say, okay, like Rumi's guest house poem, you're in my inner world as a guest. You're here for a reason. You have some message for me. There's some pain that you come from or some need that you're asking to be tended. Let me befriend you. Let me hear what your cry is. Let me hear what you need from me, and I will tend to you with care, mindfulness and heartfulness, kind of being with them.
That's huge. That's been huge for me. I was not taught that in my evangelical upbringing.
I was taught that nowhere. Exactly.
Yeah. And then physical activity, which I'm a cyclist. I've been a distance endurance runner. So that's like, I call that therapy too, when I just go out and ride my bike for a few hours,
Totally. Yeah, me too. I'm a distance runner and have been for years and didn't realize running was part of my therapy and it physically discharges stuff that is in our bodies. But also I would actually kind of metabolize some of my trauma while I was running, which is another kind of body-based way of being able to do trauma therapy on yourself. Is you just kind of, instead of reliving the memories while you're running, kind of imagine what's happening and rework with them as your body's exerting itself. It's like a powerful combination. But yeah, physical activities.
Mountain biking, because you're constantly not trying to crash and your eyes are doing this all the time. And to me, mountain biking almost functions like that EMDR stuff,
Exactly. 100%.
Yeah.
Founder of EMDR, the way she discovered it was when she would power walk and would process her memories while power walking, and doing the same thing with her eyes while she was power walking. But she couldn't do therapy getting clients to go power walk with folks, and so she had to find a different way to get the eye stimulation, and came up with that bilateral movement. But that's exactly what happens, right?
Yeah, and then the 10 is transforming trauma into art, which other than my preaching and teaching, I haven't done any, like artistic, like paintings or anything, but I've had friends that have, even I did an interview with somebody who's even used with some of the magic mushrooms and then artwork out of that. And I don't, anyway, there's a lot of different ways to transform that into art.
Well, yeah, many, many different ways and modalities, but it's taking the experience then and then reshaping it and bringing beauty out of it, whether it be music, even if it's blues or poetry or painting. For me, it was storytelling, and writing this memoir was an artistic expression. And
that's what I'm doing with my memoir right now. So yeah.
Teaching and preaching can be artful in those ways.
Definitely.
So I just want to say that epilogue there, that afterward with those 10 things of what I did to heal from trauma, really is the reason that I wrote the book. Was my sister, when she was 49, she took her own life when she started getting hounded by hallucinations and PTSD symptoms. And just before she did, she was in a mental institution, and she called me to come up and be with her. And she said, hey, 30 years ago, you were like I am. You were in an institution. You're ravaged by hallucinations and nightmares. What did you do to get better? And at the time, all I could say was, Linda, I got good help. We're going to get you good help. I'll be with you. And 3 weeks later, she took her own life. And that's what prompted me to write this book. So the book itself is my answer. This is what I did to get better. And that afterward is, if I could synthesize that into 10 things that helped, this is what I wish I could offer my sister, and what I want to offer anybody who suffers from trauma and could find some helpfulness in these resources.
So tell people, how to, where do they find you? Of course, you can go on Amazon and get the book. That's what I did. And, but you also have the Center for Engaged Compassion. Is that related to sexual abuse stuff, or
it's not related to sexual abuse per se. It is related to teaching people these compassion-based processes of self-restoration, and then how to be able to relate to others out of these compassionate spaces, even up to our enemies. And what does that look like? And so we do workshops on cultivating that kind of internal compassion, self-compassion, and compassion for others. And so all that I learned in the memoir, all that stuff, we kind of put it in workshops and programs through the Center for Engaged Compassion. So centerforengagedcompassion.org. You can find me or email me at frogers, FROGERS @cst.edu, and be happy to continue the conversation.
It's awesome. Thank you, Frank. Thank you for sharing your journey. And did you ever, when you were writing this, I'm just curious, because I'm in some of the sections that I'm writing through some of my most traumatic moments right now, where I'm at in my writing phase.
Right.
There's sometimes I just got to back away from it, and did you find yourself kind of like, were you able to sit down and let this rip, or were you moving in and out and in and out? How long did it take you to write this? I'm curious.
It took me about 18 months during the COVID months. So I was able to really give some serious writing time, but absolutely, you got to self-regulate, and you get activated from the trauma scenes or the grief scenes or whatnot, and then do what we said: go cycle, go run, go take care of yourself, find a friend to talk to, and all the things that are at our disposal to help us with.
Yeah.
This has been a deep honor for me. I feel a deep kinship with you and have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and getting to know you a bit as well. So really grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for tuning in to Spirituality Adventures. And so grateful for this moment. Thank you. Thank you, Frank. God bless you.
Absolutely. You as well.
Take care, everybody. See you next time.
Hey, I'm Kadesh Flow. It's cool to be here on the Spirituality Adventures podcast with Fred Herron. I just wrote this song that is going to be out on January 1st, and it's recorded and everything, but I still don't know it. So I'm just going to do what we can do on it. It's called Overcome. It's inspired by a character, Nanami from Jujutsu Kaisen, who I relate to a lot because he is a jiu-jitsu sorcerer, but he left that life to get a corporate job for a while because he thought it was reckless, but his gifts and passions ended up calling him back to help some of the kids out and whatnot, and it's a fateful decision, we'll say that. Used to tell people who look up to me to keep it pushing. Don't give up because for greatness we must pay a price. Gotta be honest though, the way my lane and future's looking, I'm not all that certain that I've been given great advice. Privileged by my talent when I've been trying to escape this life. Was my attempt to reject my purpose simply wasted time? Wondering what I accomplished, trying to run away from mine. People inspired by me, I'll carve a path so they can shine. This has always been a volatile way of life, exhausted. Wondering if support would come in pain as I've been walking, fighting curses with my guilt cause I'm complicit. Just being alive in the systems we exist in, I've been burned, recognizing why I'm on this earth and risking life and livelihood. I heard the call and then I listened. I wish I'd never run away. I wish this world were different. I'm just trying to last until we shift it. I pray that we can overcome. Take it into overtime. Unlock my full potential. Maintain hope that I can overcome. Yeah, I'm supposed to shine. And when the going gets tough, I still hold the line to overcome. Take it into overtime. Unlock my full potential. Maintain hope that I can overcome. Yeah, I'm supposed to shine. And when the going gets tough, I still hold the line. Was going extra hard. I hope the pay adjusted. Corporate ladder led the quagmires I was stuck in. Meanwhile, people think my skills are what luck did. They don't know how much I had to grind to make it up here. Staring down obstacles calmly, I'm just doing math. Used to think it reckless for anybody to choose this path. Walking this, you never know how quickly you can leave this earth. Been looking for answers, but just ended up receiving burn scar that clouds my vision. Pushing forward, wondering if I made the right decision. Had a decent living. Have I done enough? No, that's why I'm still relentless. Resolute with past the limits, still come to remembrance. Back when I thought leaving corporate meant that bill payments were getting through. But now I ditched the coat and tie. Know that I gotta hit the city doing just what I was built to do. Because complacency's too miserable. I pray that we can overcome. Take it into overtime. Unlock my full potential. Maintain hope that I can overcome. Yeah, I'm supposed to shine. And when the going gets tough, I still hold the line and overcome. Take it into overtime. Unlock my full potential. Maintain hope that I can overcome. Yeah, I'm supposed to shine. And when the going gets tough, I still hold the line and overcome.
Hey, you made it to the end. Thanks for listening all the way through on this episode. By the way, if you're not already a supporter, go to spiritualityadventures.com, sign up for one of our monthly supports, and you will receive our bonus content. You'll receive lots of interesting information about our guests. Many of our musicians will do special bonus songs and record a song. So I want to encourage you to do that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Be sure and subscribe. Be sure and share any of the episodes that you like. And be sure to make comments if you like them as well. This helps us get Spirituality Adventures out there to more listeners, more watchers. So whatever platform you're using, subscribe, like, share, make comments, and go to our website, sign up for our team, and be a part of the team support. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.